is the hottest topic in tech. And we are seeing that play out right here at CES across the thousands of products on our show floor. AI tools are opening new doors for innovation and collaboration. They're helping us work, learn, and live better. And they're helping us make our world more sustainable. To share more how AI is driving a fundamental shift in computing and how that's changing the world for all of us, I am thrilled to welcome Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel. I know. He's going to be great. Pat began his career in 1979 at Intel, becoming its first chief technology officer and leading its enterprise group during more than 3 decades with the company. After serving in executive leadership roles at VMware and EMC, he returned to be CEO in 2021 at Intel. He'll be joined by CNBC reporter Christina Partsinevelos. Christina joined CNBC in May 2021 and serves as the NASDAQ reporter for the network, covering NASDAQ movers with a focus on semiconductors. Previously, she served as a business correspondent and economist at the Fox Business Network, covering beats including technology, the White House, and the Federal Reserve. Please join me in welcoming Pat and Christina to the stage.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Pat. I'm very excited for this. I know it's late in the day, and we're in Vegas, right? So we want to get the party started. And I wanted to get the party started with asking you a bunch of questions, but I have to preface, you're in your quiet period right now, so I'm going to try my best to still pepper them in and hopefully get an answer.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
So if we're going to start with the conversation about artificial intelligence in general, and you have those that leaders seem to be taking sides, doomsdayers, maybe Elon Musk, talking about superintelligence and how it's going to outsmart humans, and then you have Zuckerberg on the other hand that maybe is taking a little bit of a softer approach. Where do you fall on that scale?
I'm an optimist, and I'll say, I'm a technology optimist, right? And
what does that mean?
Well, over 40 years now in the technology industry, just technology is this neutral platform, right? Meaning it's not good or bad, right? It's always how we shape it, how we use it. And I have this deep belief that with technology, right, and we're shaping it as a force for good, and we continue to solve problems that could have been solved before. And 40 years in the industry, I just believe that technology, including AI, we can shape it as this incredible force for good. And today, would you go to a radiologist that wasn't using AI-assisted radiology? Absolutely not. Just like you wouldn't have gone to a finance guy who didn't use a spreadsheet, right? Technology is this powerful, wonderful force that we get to shape for good.
You're using the example of technology, and you said 40 years, but AI in general is being adopted at a much faster pace. And I almost feel like many politicians, maybe all of us, are not even ready for that moment and how to make sure that it's going to be for good and not for bad.
Yeah, well, I always think, technology is moving faster than products. Products move faster than business, and business moves faster than regulation. So regulation is always running after trying to catch up to the implications of technology for it. And I do think as we have a broader and broader influence and the world is going more digital, it becomes more incumbent upon us as technologists to be engaged in the policy discussions, in the regulatory frameworks, so that we help close that gap, that regulation is in place to support this ever-hastening pace of technology and the implications on society.
But can you trust a for-profit company to do good? Like, didn't Google get rid of their motto, do no evil, in 2015?
Well, I think, as we think about technology, right, it really is this composite, right? And, some of it's technology companies, right? Do you trust technology companies? Part of our brand is to be a trusted technology provider. but you're also trusting the academic community, right? And increasingly, and I believe a lot of the concerns around AI, we got to make it open, we got to make it accessible, we have to make it explainable, we have to make it responsible. And every day we're not doing that, we open up domains that people shouldn't trust us, and we should get challenged. So making AI, as we say at Intel, AI everywhere, but doing so through open technology access, I think that's always the key. Can I look inside? How did it make those decisions? And until we can answer those questions, show how it was good for society, how it met the regulatory domains and demonstrated consistent good, okay, we shouldn't let it in the wild.
AI everywhere, just for our audience, you've been saying that for how long now? Because I know other competitors have, entered the...
about a year.
About a year.
Right, so, I think we claim that. I think we claim the AI PC. So some of those are clearly, we're the driving force behind it. But, flattery, we love it when people copy us.
I set that up for you just so that you could drop that there. You just mentioned AI PC, so let's just pivot to that right now. And you guys are really smart. You've been covering this probably a lot longer than I have, but it seems like the definition of AI PC, AI server is still a little murky. And let's start with the server, actually. Is that the ratio of accelerators to CPUs, no longer using just an operating system, it's a platform now? Can you just describe what the heck it means?
Yeah, and when we think about this, we say, are you able to achieve certain levels of performance, right, on AI-driven workloads? And today, for instance, if I'm doing a high-end training workload, I need a GPU. CPUs aren't powerful enough to do that. But for a lot of inferencing workloads, my AI-augmented CPUs, hey, they do inferencing just fine, right, at that level. And, training, can I go train the model or can I go use the model? How many people create weather models versus how many people use weather models? A few create, many use. So that inferencing workload, we're driving to AI enhance our Xeons, our CPUs, so that we can enable that everywhere. So it's not like I need to set up some special servers in my data centers if I'm an enterprise, or take my data to the cloud if I'm an enterprise. I can use my data in my data centers on the CPUs that I know and love from Intel. And that's what we're off to do with AI enhanced, even as we're building our accelerators to go compete at that high-end training market as well.
And then what about the hybrid market then? Because that's an area that you guys are focused on.
Yeah, and we do think that there's going to be these cloud-assisted environments, where people will do foundational models in the cloud, where we need these big, huge environments to create these foundational models. But most of you are going to use those models, right? And you're going to find smaller models. And people today, as we're hitting trillion parameter models, they're finding ways to say, if I train it on the right data, can I get by with a 10 billion parameter model that allows me to run it on my data centers without specialized equipment at much lower cost per inference? And that seems to be a huge trend of llama, tiny models, as people are finding more nimble ways, as we've described it, to be able to run it on their data for their applications.
Then are you perhaps saying that the cloud world has the curve of adoption and the use of cloud maybe is going to go like this as we become more efficient with utilizing it? And so maybe we should, and I'm thinking from the investor perspective on CNBC, we constantly have these guests on, and is cloud going to keep growing like this or hit a plateau because you become more efficient with products from Intel, for example?
Yeah, I think there's going to be the science of AI. I think there's no end in sight. These machines are going to get bigger and bigger as we try to find new, more complex models, as we move from simple models of text and we move to 3D, animation, physical worlds, et cetera. So I think the science of AI shows no end to bigger machines. They're just going to get bigger, faster, right? And it's, truly as a technologist, one of the most exciting times in computing history. This is thrilling.
One of or is? If you were to say that in your career right now.
Some of the early days were pretty exciting, but this rivals some of the early days of the PC, early days of Moore's Law. This is an exciting period of time, and I'd say, for my career, it's like, after 40 years, this is pretty thrilling. We are going to build some of the greatest technology that solves some of human problems at a pace that we haven't seen for decades. As I came back to Intel, I said, this is sort of boring, add some more cores, the same power envelope, go to PCI 5, okay, boring. This is not not boring. This is an exciting period of time.
You just said PC, so let's just talk about that for a second. And the AI PC. Everyone is talking about it at CES. I'm sure a lot of you here have heard, you heard that conversation. And many are promising that their AI PC is going to revolutionize the market and help the PC refresh, which is what 2024 now, and everybody's going to be, getting this on their laptop. But let's say, the average Joe watching, do they care even for the next 5 to 10 years about this?
Yeah, the analogy I've used is the early days of Wi-Fi, right? I helped to create Wi-Fi, right? Helped to create USB, helped to create Wi-Fi. And, we developed Wi-Fi, and for 2 to 3 years, sort of nothing happened with Wi-Fi. And then we launched Centrino, a platform, a laptop that integrated Wi-Fi, and we marketed it, we pushed it, and all of a sudden, every coffee shop needed to have Wi-Fi. Every hotel room needed to have Wi-Fi. Every office needed to have Wi-Fi. So it was that Centrino moment, as we call it, that just drove Wi-Fi and the standardization into an existence a couple of years after the standards were finished. And all of a sudden, it changed the form factors. It changed the use case. Before that, I used Excel. After that, I used the internet, right? It became this connected thing and drove new use cases for it. And, the world has not been the same since then. 20 years later, we think of the AI PC the same way, adding neural capabilities for AI workloads directly into the PC, where now I believe it's going to change the user interface. Instead of typing, I'll start talking, to it. I'll see it. It will be new form factors, and all of a sudden, instead of needing to access the cloud for things, I'm going to do it on my local PC.
But then you're making the comparison with Centrino. Back then, you guys were the leaders. You were the ones bringing that to market. It seems like you have a slew of competition in the AI PC world. So what makes Intel different?
Well, part of it is, we're first. Our AI PC chips, people are talking about what they're going to do this year, and we're excited again, flattery, right? As they're following.
They're listening right now, by the way.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, yeah.
I love it, because they're going to help to establish the category. And obviously, we're going to win by our volumes, the engagement with the ecosystem, and having the best products. So as long as our products are ahead, and we have key partners. Obviously Microsoft Copilot is super important, but we already have 100 ISVs that are running on the Core Ultra that we announced back in December, who are building their applications. They're not waiting for anybody. They're saying, wow, we're excited to start enabling these new visual effects, these new communications capabilities, these new audio use cases, taking text transcriptions and being able to give you summarizations of that on your local PC, on your local data. It's I believe this is a defining moment for the PC. And as Andy Grove said, the PC, the ultimate Darwinian device. And I think we're in one of those, Cambrian moments for the Darwinian PC.
You dropped that. That's cool. We're going to talk about everything here before you guys go party in Vegas. But if we're talking about, you went through servers, accelerators, PCs, and I just want to go back to accelerators for a moment. On December 14th, you brought up Gaudi 3. I think we were kind of expecting a little bit more.
Okay.
Can you give us a little bit more than what you spoke to, in just a few minutes? And I know you have your earnings coming up and stuff like that, but anything.
Yep. So 24, we'll be launching Gaudi 3 later this year. We have it out of fab now. It's in early test debug right now, so we're bringing it up in our labs as we speak. We'll start pushing it out to OEMs, our customers and software vendors in the next few months, that they can start joining us in the debug process. But so far, the chip looks exquisitely good. The Habana Labs team that's driving this in Israel, they are an execution machine. And
there's been no delays because of what's been going on.
No,
nothing.
Right, and as I said in a recent interview, Israel, the most resilient people on earth, and they have not missed a single. Yeah, thank you. And I have 22,000 souls there between Mobileye, Intel, our manufacturing and workers. They've not missed a single commitment on wafers, not missed a single commitment on products, despite dealing with that situation. I'm proud of our teams there, and the Gaudi team is one of them. They are executing super well.
So you bring up Israel, and I think of Mobileye. because you guys, last week, I'm sure many of you saw the news that came out of Mobileye, and they're pre-announcing the drop in sales. And again, we don't have to talk about sales per se, but it seems like maybe there's a theme right now of auto-related weakness. Microchip just yesterday talking about a weak environment, some inventory issues with customers. So what are you seeing with that? Is there a lot of double ordering, hoarding, and now they're just going through it?
Well, I do think there was a period coming off of COVID where everybody was so brutalized by not having inventories that everybody was sort of catching up, right, into the marketplace. And that drove a set of buying behaviors that created a bit of inventory in the channel and the tier one providers. And obviously Mobileye did their pre-announcement last week. And today they did a bunch of new product and vision announcements that they did yesterday.
Big partner, right, with a Western
Yes,
automaker?
a big Western partner. Hey,
Yeah.
there's probably 5 names you could associate with that, so we'll not disclose it.
I know.
We'll let them do that soon enough. But the market here was disrupted, right? This was a catastrophic disruption as you went through the COVID cycle. Both the acceleration and the deceleration and the inventory problems and manufacturing. So I'll say this, I believe this is sort of the last correction cycle as a result of it in a more normal business environment. And as Mobileye guided.
Wait, what do you mean by last correction cycle? How could you predict that?
There was such extreme pain on the auto providers that everybody was building a bit more inventory, making sure they weren't caught flat-footed again, because you had factories that were stopped because they didn't have $1 semiconductors, right? A $40,000 car isn't shipping because of it. So I do think that there's sort of an accordion effect that always happens in supply chains. And, I think we had to work through that, and I think the rest of the industry, still has some of that to do. Plus, it's been an uncertain economic environment, right? We still have wars in Europe. The European economy has been weaker. Asia, US, it's just been, a period of time where a lot of stuff going on, and we're not finished. We still have 2 major wars going on in the world.
Yeah, what about Asia? Is there anything that you can just weigh on the weakness coming from that market, whether it be from the mobile, a PC market? It seems like at first, maybe a few months ago, I was reporting and thinking, okay, PC sales coming back, refresh, all of this conversation, and now maybe that cycle is not moving as quickly as we thought.
Yeah, I think China has been well chronologized. It didn't come back as strong as expected. Not terrible, but not as strong as expected in that growth. Otherwise, Asia actually did okay. India, had actually a quite good cycle as they finished the year. Europe, not as strong, and has I think been well chronologized. And U.S. was pretty good, as we went through the holiday period. So I think when you add all of that up, it just wasn't as strong as people were hoping for, as we finished the year. I do think as we look to this year, we think of the AI PC. We're now 4 years past when the COVID, PCs were first bought. So I think that starts to come back a little bit. Obviously, major new Windows operating systems is always beneficial. So we're more optimistic as we go through the year.
I want to bring it back to the United States and, talking about AI. Many of you guys have heard of, the New York Times suing OpenAI. OpenAI's rebuttal about that, saying that the New York Times, purposely rejigged it. I'm paraphrasing poorly now, but in terms of getting the articles. And so, do you believe that this is just going to catapult a bunch of lawsuits now going forward?
Yeah, I think that there isn't a legal framework yet that's really been thought through, because if you compare search to large language models, essentially in search, the search engine itself never has the content, right? It's giving you a pointer to the content.
Right.
And one of the things early in my career, I actually helped write what became the net neutrality laws.
Back in, 2002 or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. When we first drafted, Craig Mundy, CTO of Microsoft, and
you
myself.
were sitting there writing it?
Yeah,
literally.
We literally wrote what became.
Well, not writing it, you were writing it on a computer. But.
And I do think that where there's going to be a legal framework that gets established because when you do a large language model, essentially you're compressing the internet into the model, right? It becomes intrinsically part of the model now as you then go do inferencing against that model. So in that, what will be the legal framework against that? Can I use third-party information? What's the copyright laws? I think there are going to be some lawsuits here. And remember, we're going to have lawsuits in different jurisdictions as well.
Of course.
U.S., what happens in Europe, how do they view it as well? So I do think that, whether this is a good one or a bad one with the New York Times and OpenAI, I firmly believe there's going to be a series of lawsuits that need to get reconciled for what is the legal framework around large language models, compressing the internet this way, and being able to use third-party information or not, and what are going to be the copyright laws associated with that.
Do you actually think there's an or not?
Well, if so, then you're going to have licensed content that gets used, right? And you're going to have to go pursue and get licenses from all of the content providers that you use in your model. Wow, right? That's going to create a whole nother cycle of what and how does that get utilized.
And helps the media market where I work, sustain our jobs.
Yeah, and we want you to have a great job. So.
Yeah, so let's not talk about that. But keeping on that conversation about regulation, and then that means that you have to be reliant on politicians and bureaucracy. We know how slow that is, but we also know how quickly AI is being adopted. So that's already they're slower than normal just because it's government. We have an election period coming, and then the adoption rate is so quick compared to any other technology phase. So how do we even come up with regulations within such a short amount of time?
Well, I don't think we will. I think the AI market is going to keep racing ahead because technology is enabling it to do so. And the courts and the regulatory environment will be chasing to catch up for a while. And eventually, some of those cases will come to court, whether that's in Europe or in the US, and it will start to reestablish a framework that the world gets comfortable with about how AI is regulated, how content's regulated. And then, of course, we have to frame it in a way it isn't just about text on the internet, right? It's going to be about a much broader corpus of information as well, going into those models. So I do think there's going to be a big set of legal and regulatory work that needs to occur here. But I'm actually, as we started the conversation, an optimist. We'll figure it out.
You are the leader of a large corporation making money. Of course you're going to be optimistic.
Yes. Is that bad?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Good. Just checking.
Not at all. but of course, I know I almost didn't want to ask you that question to start off because I knew your answer, and you know the answer from a lot of tech leaders that of course they're going to be optimistic, because if you're not optimistic, you're not making money, sales, you're not employing all the people, and we wouldn't all be here listening to you.
But it's more important than that, because these AI use cases are demonstrating such extraordinary economic value. Right? It isn't just that we're going to make money or the other technology providers are going to make money associated with it. You're creating new economic value, right? We're taking use cases, and having 10, 100,000, 10,000x productivity improvements. This is stunning as a result. And because there's so much economic value in these use cases, the world is motivated to figure it out.
That productivity level, is that productivity something that is going to immediately come? A company will be extremely efficient, and then after that, you're going to see, a much smaller increment in. I'm not using the terminology properly, but I feel like there's an analogy with Moore's law that you can make there. Productivity is not going to keep growing as much, so it'll be this big bang now, maybe over the next decade, and then boom, we're on to something else.
Yeah, I think when we first introduced the internet, right? And we had e-businesses and new ways to reach customers. It was sort of this decade-long cycle. I think the AI cycle is at least that big. And sort of domain by domain, we're going to find the economic value, the use cases are going to get developed. We're going to get past the models hallucinating and building more and more confidence in what they do. But yeah, I think we're going to be in a 10+ year cycle of figuring it out in different industries, and it's going to be quite thrilling.
So if we were to compare an AI model within the cloud and an enterprise user versus an AI model that we are eventually going to use on our phones, is the phone side going to change the economics, or on the edge, I should say, because of AI PCs? How is that going to change the economics of everything, given how expensive it is on the cloud?
Well, part of it is, I call it the 3 laws of edge computing. Whether that's your phone, whether that's the in-store computing, whether that's your personal computer. The first is laws of economics. Right? It's cheaper to do it in your device. You bought the device, I'm running it locally, I'm not renting cloud servers to do that. It's on my device. Second is the laws of physics. If I have to round trip the data to the cloud and back, okay, it's not going to be as responsive as I can do locally. And the third is the laws of the land. Right? Because am I going to take my data to the cloud, or am I going to keep it on my local device? Am I going to take my real-time factory data, my supply chain data, my local camera data to the cloud or not? And a lot of that's going to be regulated in some fashion or another. Or I, as the user, say, I'm not comfortable, right, with that data going to the cloud. So I think those three laws of economics, laws of physics, and laws of the land will drive more of these AI use cases to the devices that we use across the edge. And that's part of what we mean when we say AI everywhere, right? We're going to push it and enable all of these devices locally. And maybe I don't need 100 languages on my local device. I just need the 2 that I need. And when I don't have that language, okay, I'll go to the cloud and download that additional model. I want it to work on my data if I'm the enterprise. I don't want all of my data, my factory data, my supply chain data going to the cloud. I want it to be operated on locally in my environment.
But if it's locally, how do companies like Intel continue to make money? I think of a phone, right? My phone is maxed out, so I got to pay money to...
Sell more PCs, sell more servers.
No, but I mean adding applications. Like right now with a cell phone, you have so many, you got to pay for saving all your photos because it doesn't fit on your phone, and you have to transfer, so now I'm paying a monthly fee. And then that's putting it back on the cloud. So for a company like Intel, if it's going to be all localized, how do you add that incremental revenue when everything's there and it's a fixed cost, they buy the AI PC and done?
I think this is going to be a thrilling time of new use cases emerging, right? That all of the economic implications, we're going to be enjoying this for many CESs to come. We have a lot of innovation to do for this. And part of what does, when you run these models, it's compressing it into smaller and smaller form factors. So I'm able to, get more intelligence locally with smaller and smaller footprints and models. And that's part of the magic of AI. We're just getting started.
Oh, look at that. It's almost as if you're a professional at this, because the clock is literally down to 10 seconds, and that is a great way to end our conversation.
We are just getting started.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pat. I'll shake your hand. It was good. That was great. That was good.
Thank you.
Here, we're going this way.
Thank you both so much. Wasn't that great? Yes. Well, over the past several years, we've seen a revolution in healthcare-focused technology. Thanks to new digital health tools, we're seeing health become more personalized, accessible, and intelligent than ever before. From the fitness trackers on our wrist to the telehealth platforms that connect us with doctors and therapists. Now, I'm a huge fan of digital health at CES, so I am beyond excited to welcome our next keynote speaker, Gail Boudreau, President and CEO of Elevance Health. Yes, you can do that. Named one of Fortune's 100 most powerful women in business, she leads their work that serves some 117 million people, bringing more than 3 decades of experience in the healthcare industry. Gail is focused on transforming Elevance Health from a traditional health benefits company to a lifetime trusted health partner. She'll be joined on stage by Dr. Peter Lee, Vice President of Research and Incubations at Microsoft. Peter leads Microsoft's research in areas like AI, computing foundations, health, and life sciences. Previously, he served in leadership roles at DARPA, the Department of Defense's Advanced Research Project Agency, and as a professor in computer science at Carnegie Mellon University. Please join me in welcoming Gail and Peter to the stage.
Well, it's incredibly exciting to be here and really an honor to share the stage with you, Gail. As we just heard, one of the most powerful business leaders in the country and certainly, of course, doing some of the most important work. Maybe we should just start by quickly introducing ourselves. As you just heard, I'm Peter Lee, and I lead research at Microsoft. I've been there for 13 years, although I had a 4.5-year stint. At first I thought Satya Nadella, our CEO, was sending me to purgatory to reimagine our healthcare technology business at Microsoft. And so that ended up actually being a real gift and has brought me into this space. Gail?
Great. Well, it's fantastic to share the stage with you, Peter. We had the pleasure of actually having you join our leadership group at our summit most recently, and it was absolutely invigorating for our leaders. Gail Boudreau, CEO and President of Elevance Health. You heard a little bit about what we are trying to do there, but I always love to start with our purpose, which is very different than you would think of from a company that started its history in the benefit space, and that's to improve the health of humanity. And our goal there, and we're going to talk a lot about this, how exciting it is, and sort of the point of transformation that we're at, which is to really become a trusted lifetime health partner for individuals. And I think we have an incredible opportunity where we are now in terms of both the progress we're making around scale and data and new technologies to really change how healthcare is. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, so am I. In fact, we were having a great conversation just in the backstage there, and we got into so many topics, so let's try to get through as many of them as we can here. And maybe the good place to start is with data, because maybe for the past 2 decades, the digitization of healthcare and health data has been, I think, an underappreciated thing. Of course, we all want more value out of data. We want decisions and insights to be data-driven. But we forget sometimes just how much has gone digital. And so at Elevance, what is your view of the value of health data, and what is Elevance doing today in the data-driven insights space?
Well, I think you heard in the introduction, we serve over 117 million consumers, all in the United States. And data is hugely important. Sort of data is the fabric of how we actually make progress. But I want to go back to, before we talk about data, which is personalization. Because I think for us, data is about a couple of things. It's about like improving the consumer journey, personalizing healthcare, which is an incredibly difficult journey right now. It's secondarily about improving the healthcare system. So how do we improve clinical interactions and use that data to also make it simpler in terms of our own operations? And then how do we use it to be more predictive in healthcare? So as I think about data, I'll give you a couple of just kind of quick examples on maybe the first one, and I know we'll probably get into a couple of the others. But, the consumer journey, I want to start with that because I think, as we were sharing a little bit backstage, I think it's important for all of us to either be a patient, a caregiver, or go back into the system to remind ourselves that even though we work in this industry every single day, how difficult it is at times to navigate that system. And as part of that, I've had that opportunity through my family to be participant as a caregiver in the system. And it reminds me, again, how do we connect the pieces? And one of the areas that we spend a lot of energy on at Elevance Health is something called concierge care. And that sounds pretty ubiquitous, right? It sounds pretty simple. It's kind of how we think about things in the rest of our lives. But in healthcare, it's hard. And so what we've built is basically using AI, using generative technology, and trying to understand the consumer, providing them with the tools, an app and a way to log their healthcare data, be able to answer very specific questions, but importantly, not just about the consumer, but to connect them to care teams, connect them to our clinicians who can also see what's happening in their lives. And then they can take it full scale, both from understanding their benefits, because about 30% of the questions we get still are about, how does my health insurance work? What are my benefits? How do I use them? Those are pretty straightforward, simple questions, but when you're going through something, you want to understand that. To who's the best provider? How do I match that personally with someone that's going to be good for me and right for me? So that's embedded in this concierge tool, and I think it's particularly important. And then the care team, instead of having to call you and reach out or send you a letter, should be able to see that data with your permission and be able to engage and look at things that are happening in your life and provide opportunities for either at-home care from a discharge. So I look at that as a great opportunity where we're able to be much more predictive and proactive And we've seen some pretty good results. Emergency room visits are down pretty significantly in our patients who are enrolled in oncology care. Our diabetics have seen an improvement in their A1C results, and so we're able to identify signs and intervene in depression earlier. So I think there's some really promising things, and that's an example of sort of the consumer and the clinician coming together and trying to make this journey a lot simpler than it is.
So there's just a ton to unpack in all of that. I at least find some important things to dive into. First off, on the consumer piece of it, there's a technology piece, but there's also, I think, underlying both of those, this question of trust.
Right.
So maybe we can try to go into each of these. I'm really struck in this conversation and in our previous conversation backstage. You talk so much in consumer terms, and I think you're not doing that just because we're at the Consumer Electronics Show.
Right.
I think that's really who you are, and that's really where you are taking Elevance. So say a little bit more about this idea of being a consumer-facing, a consumer-oriented company.
Yeah, I think part of our evolution, I mean, I just go back to what I started with our purpose, and started with, trying to be a trusted partner. We have to serve individuals. We have to help support them in a very complicated healthcare journey. So we actually look at three constituents that I think they're really important. One is the consumer, the individual that buys our products, that are part of the healthcare system. The second is the care provider, because they in the healthcare are intimately involved in what you need healthcare. And then the third is community. And for us, community is really important because the health, we often say you're only as healthy as the community in which you live, and we really saw that during COVID. So as we think about the consumer, I think it's really important. Again, it's about simplification and personalization. And that's an area that healthcare has historically struggled with. So a lot of what we're doing and developing is to do that. And I think that's where AI is great. AI has a huge opportunity for us through chatbots and other things to answer questions in a very personal way. When you call, just like when you call any other any other service you have, that we know who you are, we know what your history is, we know what is important to you, and then we can channel you to the right resources. So that's important. But as you and I were talking about backstage, I actually think, as encouraging and as exciting as technology is, particularly AI, it's only going to move at the speed of trust in healthcare. And that's really important. And so what do I mean by that? Healthcare is, because it's so personal and because you need to be right, and it does need to be responsible. And we know there's already bias in things, that we see that in some of the data, that we have to be incredibly right about doing it. And we've built a responsible AI model that we started long before we started to do this at scale. And it really gets back to sort of 5 core principles. One, it's got to be transparent. Everybody's got to know what the inputs are. We've got to make sure that it's equitable, that for communities that we know there are disparities already based on human behavior, that we're taking account of that, and we have a group that looks at that as well. It's got to be safe. In healthcare, your data's got to be safe. It's got to be secure. It can't be all around. The people using it have to be accountable. That's another, I think, really important key, that we're accountable for the outcomes, because we can't have things go wrong. We can't have hallucinations. We have to have clinicians still checking this work. And again, we have to have it documented, and we have to test it. And I think one of the things that we're really looking at a lot is testing these models, making sure they're working as we thought. And I think that's really important for trust. And the last thing I would say, and we were talking a little bit about that, which I'm really excited about, is I think we have to get our own employees and everyone in the system to trust it, along with consumers. And we're trying to do that, and we call it democratizing AI, and we use, with our associates, an opportunity to work on Fabric inside of the company. So they test it, they get comfortable, they understand it, but it's within, again, a very controlled environment. So we're careful that it doesn't have an adverse impact on patients and others.
Well, just from the vantage point of all of us at Microsoft, it's been really interesting and impressive just to watch the deep experimentation that you're doing, and doing so with care. Before we get into the technology piece, on the consumer piece, I think that I was struck also about how personal this is, because you yourself, of course, are a consumer of healthcare, and I don't want to tease out anything that's overly private, but you take this all very personally, don't you?
I do. I was sharing with Peter backstage, just being a caregiver in my own family, I've had to go into the healthcare system, and I'm a very knowledgeable healthcare consumer, and obviously the company I run, and I've found the discontinuities to be troubling. And as an incredibly experienced healthcare user consumer, someone who is trying to simplify it. So it really reminds me, and as I started before, I think it's important for all of us to go to the reality of what you're doing. And the one thing I also wanted to share on this is partnerships are really important. I think in a lot of industries, we always talk about partnerships. In healthcare, it's an ecosystem, and making sure that ecosystem is connected. So when things are done outside of the ecosystem, that's where I don't think it's as impactful. If they're done to the side, they're not integrated with the core delivery, the core payment mechanisms, the whole way the system works. And that's particularly important. And I think, again, that's where you start to build trust with your trading partners, with all the people who participate in the healthcare system. Right. And I think that's really important. And I'll just give you another real quick example. We are, access is another issue in healthcare, and talk a little bit about virtual care, access to the internet. We're doing a partnership with the cell providers and Samsung to roll out in our Medicaid population to individuals that we know do not have internet access right now and do not have access to some of the virtual care applications. And so giving them unlimited text and talk, and then educating them on how they can use that for healthcare, because we know they have medical needs. And again, that's a partnership that you wouldn't think of normally. It's outside of healthcare per se, but I think there's a big opportunity to make that digital divide smaller across populations, and that's a great example of getting more people into the system to use healthcare more efficiently.
All right, so it's consumer, but it's also the electronics show, so let's get a little bit nerdy here. Of course, there's just a ton of evolution in the technology, and at least from where I'm sitting, my whole research division is consumed with generative AI and what's going on there, but that's not the only thing happening. So, what is your take on all of this? It certainly appears from the outside, looking in at events, that the same thing is happening in your organization, that there is sort of a rethink of all the fundamental technology assumptions. But what's the reality here?
Yeah, no, I think there is a rethink, but I think it starts with culture. We started with trust. Then it goes to culture. And I think the reason we're trying to democratize this is because I think your own associates and those you work with have to have the trust as well. And you have to have a culture of not just putting technology to solve a problem, but fundamentally, and I think I heard Pat say this, transform your entire business model beyond. You got to think about the art of the possible here. And if you're just doing this incrementally, which I think we have historically done a lot of very incremental things, then I don't think it works. And so, as I think about the buckets, we talked a lot about consumer. There's a huge opportunity inside of our enterprise and inside of the business of healthcare to use AI and other technology to simplify. And great examples. We have thousands and thousands of pages of policy documents, claim rules, that we have an opportunity to simplify those and get those in the hands of the clinicians very quickly, and that's something we've done. And it's great also for the care practitioners, because they don't need to be spending their time there. They need to be spending their time in clinical. We've been working with the EMR vendors to do that. So a great example, we had over 157 million clinical records transferred to us for about 27 million patients last year. Great example. I don't need faxes, and I laughed about this, but I still get faxes. In this day and age, we still get faxes, and we're trying to eliminate that. So it's about workflow change, and it's about integrating this, and then being able to use that information to simplify the process. And those are just very, I think, practical ways that the business part of healthcare needs to improve.
Tell us the truth. Do you have a fax machine in your office?
I do not have one in I have a printer that could fax, but I don't have a fax machine.
So if I could just stay on generative AI, you mentioned problems with hallucinations. There's also issues with bias. And that seems to impinge on the trust issue, because there will be a fear that people will have that, my claims might get denied because of some biased AI. And so what's your approach there?
Yeah, so that's an area that we are incredibly cautious about in terms of setting the responsible AI framework that I said. Nothing goes into production without complete and detailed testing and documentation. And honestly, I would say on the claims rule engine, we still have humans making the final decision. So it's human-centered design on it. Same thing with clinical. No AI is making a clinical decision. So what it is doing really in the early stages is it is taking all of the policies, all of the latest data, all of the information, and providing recommendations and information for the clinician and the claim processor to do that better. And on the claim side, it's really good because we get a lot of bad data in. So we can get that data electronically, and we can get that with the right fields filled in, then we have a huge opportunity to pay it right and stop the back and forth that goes on. So I think the early stages of that are huge amounts of improvement. You know, that 10x kind of improvement is there. I mean, we're seeing 20 to 25% improvement in productivity already because of that. So we need to get that at scale. I mean, we operate at giant scale, and so we want to make sure that we roll that out. And another area that I would point to, again, probably less sexy than some of the things we talk about, but it's provider data. So all of you go on and try to pick a care provider that's part of a network, as part of your insurance program, or you're trying to find someone who matches your preference. So making sure that data is clean and right is really important, and we spend a lot of energy making sure that, and then constantly updating that through AI and other means, and also being able to personalize it. So when you want someone in a certain area that's a high-performing provider with certain outcomes, certain availability, then we can personalize that to you as opposed to you trying to find that. So I think those are less, out there kind of things and very practical applications for consumers and care providers to improve just the working environment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the conversations we've had with some of your technical staff, while the generative AI models do exhibit biases, they are also surprisingly effective at reviewing and spotting biases and biased decisions made by others, whether AI or human. And so the potential to have it as another tool in the arsenal to, let's say, look at data sets and see if there are biases or to spot them or look at decisions,
right.
I think has been one of the more interesting things that I know there's some good experimentation going on.
Yeah, and I also think it's an ability to add new data sets that we haven't historically captured, even in the EMR. So things around social drivers, food, healthy food, prescriptions for that, other pieces of people's lives that drive depression or drive, a lack of compliance with their current protocols. And I think that's beginning to open up, and I think that's a huge opportunity. And then for us, we use it to then connect people to those social services. So it's, we know that 80% of people's health doesn't happen in the physician's office. It happens in your life. It happens in your community. And so being able to take all of that information in addition to what's happening, with your medical protocol, your social, behavioral, bring it together and then, have recommendations for how do we intervene sooner? How do we help you? How do we help your caregivers? I think is really exciting. And we've built, we're doing like 4,000 of these a day with our clinicians, sending them what we call these whole health interventions for them to basically meet with the patient and help them identify that so they don't have to do it up front and think about it. I think those are real opportunities.
Now, I've kind of gone overboard focusing on generative AI. There are other technologies that are really important. And when we're talking especially health data, there's the whole issue of interoperability.
Right.
And this has been a huge push by your whole organization. We've tried in our cloud, actually not just in our cloud, but working with the other major cloud vendors to try to be as supportive as possible. Are we making progress on interoperability?
Slow. I think we're making some. I think we have a huge opportunity to accelerate it. I think that is sort of embedding it across the industry. And I'm actually quite encouraged. We participate in a number of industry forums. I think with the EMR vendors, there's nothing proprietary about how we should be sharing data back and forth, particularly clinical records. We're all doing it. We all have to do it for regulatory as well as clinical purposes. The ability to do that across everything, I think, is a big opportunity. So we're meeting in groups, we're talking about, I think we've made some progress, but I think we still have a big opportunity to continue to do that.
Okay. So I'm going to change the subject a little bit now and shift to this relationship. It's actually kind of underlied almost everything you said here today, the relationship between payer and provider. And that, of course, has been evolving a lot. It's actually gotten more diverse, more in a way, harder to understand. So can you demystify this, or at least what is the Elevance view of the best working relationship between provider and payer?
Yeah, I don't know if I can demystify it. That's a tall task, but I'll try in terms of our perspective. I mean, we think care providers, I'll go back to the ecosystem. We all have very unique roles in this health ecosystem. And our goal in the ecosystem is to work as effectively as possible around accessibility and affordability and simplicity. And oftentimes, we get into things around affordability. For example, I think our best opportunity is we're very focused on value for payment and moving the system to value-based care, providing data at the right time and intervention in the system. Our goal is to have, the majority of all of our arrangements in value-based care and to bring, along individuals. It sounds really simple, but it's really hard. And it requires a different way of practicing, and it requires us to share data ubiquitously, real time. It requires us to have very specific roles in the system. So I think there's a big opportunity. I think the huge opportunity for us in the short run is what we've talked about, which is to take some of the burden off of both parties right now. We get into a lot of discussion around pre-authorization. Well, by sharing this clinical data back and forth, we can take away a lot of that burden by being very upfront about what we need, getting the data correctly, and then letting the care providers know exactly where they are, so they're not spending all that time. And I think that begins to build some trust, and it also frees them up to invest in other things and be much more focused on the clinical care side. So we view it as a critical trading partner, a critical part of the ecosystem. There are times when it's not always as, we're in different parts of negotiations, but I think ultimately we generally get to the right place, and I'm really encouraged because I think with technology and data and our ability to take the noise out of the system, we can actually drive much better outcomes and better care on both sides. And I think ultimately that's our goal. It's certainly our goal for patients. Consumers want that, and I think care providers ultimately want to be able to practice much more simply.
Yeah. So, we are at the Consumer Electronics Show, and so I think we had a good focus on consumers. If we're back here together 1 year, at 2025, what do you think will be different?
I think we're going to have better outcome use cases for where we've deployed this. Now, part of this is we started with experimentation, and now we're moving to scale and in our own enterprise. And we're getting better at understanding what the outcomes are. And I think we're getting smarter at where to deploy this. So I think a year from now, we're going to have very much clearer understanding of the outcomes and where we can accelerate even faster. And lots of people have talked about, are we under or overestimating impact? And I think in the short run, we're probably overestimating, and certainly in the long run, underestimating, but it's coming faster. So the half-life is much quicker. And again, I look at those three categories. I think it will be much easier for consumers to use and understand and be an integral part of the system. I think for us inside of the business part of healthcare, those use cases can be scaled pretty quickly, and we can continue to show value and demonstrate that. I think the insights and outcomes where it's more clinical, at least on our side of the business, will probably be slower to emerge because we need to be more careful about building that trust together and making sure that we have it right. But I think in the first two use cases, we can move at rapid speed, and I think we're going to see the outcomes of that in this next year.
So we're coming close to the end of our time here, and I wanted to ask you, I'll give you a choice. I wanted to go next to some of the community-based thinking that you're doing. But let me give you the choice between, in the last couple of minutes we have here, between that or any other thing that you'd like to have this audience leave with here today.
Boy, can I do both a little bit? I'll
Sure.
do community first, because I do think I'll go back to how important community is for us to be interconnected. And that's not just the payers and care providers, but also the city government. There's a ton of data in our public health system that we need to connect, and we saw that certainly through COVID. And I'm excited. I think we really have to focus as a system on whole health. So the interconnection of physical, behavior, and social. And we've often, we talk a lot about medical health. We're talking more about behavioral health, and certainly we see that in the numbers right now. And social, sort of, we talk about it, but it's not integrated. So I think the big opportunity there is for us to connect those pieces, truly connect them and stop the silos that we've historically operated in. And again, that will take trust, and it will take data, and it will take integration of systems. And I think the only thing I'd leave you with, I think it's a really exciting time in our industry. And I'll go back to, we have to be responsible. We have to move. We can't get so excited that we move faster than the market and the participants are ready, and we have to move, I think, at the speed of trust. Because if we lose that, we will not be able to do, I think, the incredible things and the potential that we have to do.
Well, just from my vantage point, looking at what you are doing at Elevance, you are moving fast, but it is impressive, the care with which you're doing it. And we're hearing a lot just on the focus on consumers, on the focus on trust. I think it'll make a real difference.
Yeah, well, thank you. We have an incredible team who's been working on this for a long time, and I think long before it became sort of in the lexicon of everyone talking about it. And I think part of that has allowed us to mature and integrate it into our business. And again, now I think it is about the democratization of it, meaning, again, everyone getting, not to be afraid of it, to try it, to play with it, to use it, but also protect the data. And healthcare data is so precious that we have to protect it, especially and people have to opt into it. And I think that's going to be really important.
Well, thank you, Gail. It's been a real honor to spend this time with you, and we're counting on you to make this better.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.